Hey guys, I apologize ahead of time. This one really got away from me, and I will do better in the future on keeping it to one topic at a time and have much shorter videos. Um, this one's way too long, so I added chapters and timestamps so you can jump to the parts that interest you. Um, Unless you're really bored and you have nothing better to do than listen to me blither on about gardening for an hour and a half, then feel free. um, because I just kind of kept talking and didn't shut up. So I hope you find what you're looking for, and enjoy the video.
Hello everybody, welcome to the dungeon or my basement grow room. If you're watching this and you're planning on starting peppers this year, now's the time because peppers grow pretty slow. If you're planning on starting onions from seed this year, which means you can pick your variety and you'll probably get the biggest onions if you start them from seeds. If you haven't done it yet, you're a couple weeks behind. So the first thing I'm going to do is mix up a little bit of potting soil um, for the onions and peppers. I don't know how many, some people I'm sure don't know this. When you buy bagged potting soil, so I bought these today, cheapest ones I could find, they're probably not completely organic. Earth Grow potting soil, both of these bags were like $4.50 or something like that. Straight potting mix, they try and make it as sterile as possible. So that you don't get a lot of disease on your seedlings. Downside of that is you have to fertilize right away because there's no nutrients in this. It's pretty much, this one is peat moss, composted forest products, which means shredded up wood, sand, and perlite. Perlite is an expanded volcanic rock. It's the white stuff that looks like styrofoam. It's actually a rock, but super light. It's just filler. It's important for like having loose, aerated soil rather than compacted soil. And it just I want to say the coarseness of it stores a lot. It holds a little bit of water. It's also good for drainage. So I don't have any peat moss left. Normally I make my own potting soil. I just get the big bale of peat moss, and I do 5 parts peat moss, 4 parts perlite, 3 parts worm castings. You can see I've got a big worm bin there, got a worm bin here. That brown trash can is also a worm bin. So all my kitchen scraps and all my junk mail, which I shred, goes in those, and I get worm castings back. I don't have much left, so I might have to dig some out of here. But for today, I may have enough. This is the last of my homemade stuff. Well, I'll get you a picture of that in some decent light so that you can see that. That might be enough. Onions. You can start onions in as small a tray as this. This is like a 200 count tray. Really small. Then again, onions is like starting an individual blade of grass. The other thing you can do, you can start several seeds in a plug like this, and then just put the whole plug in the ground, and you'll grow like 4 onions in a clump, which is fine if you don't want great big onions because they'll kind of crowd themselves. You'll get medium-sized onions. I'm going to start my onions in this, and then I will pull them apart. You can pull onions apart. Some people some people will start 100 onions in something like this. To just completely cover the soil with seeds, put a little bit of seed starting mix, the super fine stuff, over that, and then just let it sit until they germinate. Because onion is like the one plant that we grow that you can literally sit there and pull the roots apart and it won't just completely kill the plant. The roots are super wiry. Um, they're a lot stronger. They don't tangle up as much. So that makes it a lot easier. If you don't want to spend all your time filling up all these cells and stuff like that, a lot of people will just take the tray itself, just the black tray, fill that up with soil, put their seeds in there, and just grow. It looks like you're growing turf. It looks like you're literally starting grass in one of these for some reason. I'm just going to do it this way because that's what I'm comfortable with. I like to be able to see once I actually get once the seeds actually germinate and I have some stuff growing, I like to be able to see where my water level's at underneath these when I'm watering. It'd be pretty easy if with the totally enclosed tray for you to overwater. That's just a concern that I have. That's why I'm not going to do it that way. Probably for onions, as long as you don't go completely crazy, I'm sure it's not too bad to manage. I'm just going to do it the way that I've done it in the past. So, and then onions and peppers. I'm going to use the exact same soil mix. I use the same soil mix for everything. The difference is some things, if you have tiny enough seeds, I use the actual seed starting mix, which is milled down. It's super fine particles. That way you get a little bit of soil coverage on your seed without burying them way too deep where they'll never pop up. But the thing that comes to mind is celery. Celery seed, it almost seems microscopic. There's a bunch of flower seeds that are the same way. So for those things with the super tiny little specks of seed, you can use the milled seed starting mix. And that's why the particles are super fine, basically. You'll never have like a big chunk of, I don't know, there's a stick. You know, for some bigger seeds, bigger plants, they can easily just kind of push past that. Or here's a chunk of what is either just a piece of peat, compressed peat. I think that's what it is. Every once in a while, I'll get a little piece of bark. Those tiny seeds can't push up through that, and you'll just get spottier germination. So I'm going to get started filling these. We'll find out if I have enough of this. You know what? Just to make sure everything stays the same. So this was mixed. What I have left in here is, where's my cup? I always use the same thing right here. 5 scoops of peat moss, 4 scoops of perlite, 3 scoops worm castings. That's what's in here now. But to keep everything even in case I run out before I'm done planting today, I'm going to go ahead and put these 2 bags in here. We'll mix it all up. No, I cannot stand up straight in this basement unless I have my head between the joists and I look for nails first. So we'll kind of hate it down here because my back is always sore. Either I'm sitting on this 1 foot tall stool or I'm standing stooped over like an idiot. I can already tell this potting soil has a lot less perlite than what's in my mix, so I'm glad I did this. And again, there's very little, if any, nutrients in here. So I'm going to add some worm castings too. Let's just do that now. This is a flow-through worm bin that I made. So I just cut a hole in the bottom and made like a little shelf out of little pieces of PVC that I pushed all the way through the can. And then when you first start, so all your stuff doesn't just fall right through, I put down some cardboard and then kitchen scraps, shredded newspaper, shredded paper of any kind, as long as it doesn't have like that plastic coating like magazines and some of your higher quality paper that you might get in the mail. Right now I got a lot of tissue paper from Christmas. But kitchen scraps, banana peels, coffee grounds, and the filters. That's probably the bulk of what's in here is coffee grounds and coffee filters. That's the largest single thing. That's probably 30-40% of everything in here. Banana peels, apple cores, orange peels. We even put the little grape things in there. It all eventually gets broken down into worm castings. I'm just scratching my fingers in between these PVC pipes, dragging out some castings. And the other thing that goes in here is water. Every time I add that stuff, I spray with water until the paper looks soggy, especially in the flow-through bins. They dry out a lot faster than, say, this one that is fully enclosed. This is 3 of these totes stacked together. 2 of them have holes drilled in the bottom. The last one collects all the moisture. This one stays damp. These 2 tend to dry out. So I put a lot more water in these 2 than I do that one. But you have to add water to all of them. Otherwise, it'll just completely dry out and your worms will eventually die off. Let's see. How much I got in here? Yeah, that'll work. Got trays. I don't know. Got several decent handfuls in there. There's like a whole avocado. Break that. Or what was once. Now it's just the avocado, the peel husk, whatever you want to call it. Throw that back in. Eggshells. Smash up all your eggshells. Put that in there. That's really good for peppers and tomatoes. Blossom end rot, where the bottom of your pepper or your tomato starts to rot on the very bottom. That's called blossom end rot. It's usually a moisture issue due to a calcium deficiency. So if you're adding calcium back to your soil, which eggshells are pretty much pure calcium, they will eventually break down into a plant available form. So if you're adding that to your garden every year, you won't have to worry about blossom end rot nearly as much. If you're using raised beds, so you have good drainage, that's another big leg up on that problem. If you have worm bins, especially the open ones, where all the castings are open to the air, there's always going to be some gnats, fruit flies associated with that. That's why I have the jars, fly traps. They work really well. So unless you're really overfilling this, it's not really a problem. But I'm going to mix all this up, and yes, there's you can see pieces of shredded paper. It'll break down eventually. I'm not going to go in there and pick out every little one. In these flow through bins, if I would do it over again, I'd probably make them all this way, where you're just stacking layers on top of each other. Um, all my food right now is going in this top bin. All the food scraps and shredded paper are going in the top bin. Um, the one underneath that was the top one for several months. And once it got so much material in it, I dumped the one under it and then switched their place. So the worms will naturally just migrate up through the soil. Composting worms, red wigglers, um, they only live in like the top inch or so of soil, and they're constantly working, breaking down um, that the plant waste, um, into worm castings, and they just kind of naturally migrate up through the system as they go. So eventually, that bottom stuff, they kind of clear out of there. And I don't know, I go by volume. I usually end up with about 3 inches of worm castings in the bottom one when I'm ready to harvest that. I would say that's every like 4 or 6 months. So anyway, I now have the worm castings I just dumped in here. Compost, natural fertilizer. That way, all this potting mix will have plenty of nutrients. I won't have to go back and use like the liquid fertilizer or anything on my seedlings. I do not feed them at all the whole time they're down here. This is it, and it's plenty. It's probably overkill what I just did. Big deal. I don't think the plants are going to be harmed by it at all. Now you did hear me say, they try to keep potting mixes sterile to keep disease away from your plants. And that's a risk I'm willing to take. Plants are expendable. Believe it or not, 3 of those are still definitely alive. These two big pepper plants are alive. This one, I would bet, is still alive. This is the one that I dug out of the garden last fall. So it had the most root ball damage. That may be dead. I'm leaning towards probably is. That one back there, 50-50, I wouldn't bet on it either way. That's a jalapeno in that pot, and it's been in that pot for a couple years. But I forgot to water them the entire month of December. Christmas happened, and they probably went mid-November until the first week of January with no water at all. And I was like, oh shit, I have plants downstairs that I still need to water. So I just watered them really good. And once you dry out a plant like that, once the soil is completely dry, you have to water more than once. Because what will happen is, dump a bunch of water in, it runs right through the pot and out the bottom. You have to water it until you see all kinds of water run out the bottom, and then give it at least 20 minutes, half hour. Couple hours, fine. Come back, and by that time, the little bit of moisture that is still in the soil has kind of opened up the pores, although like water retaining potential of all that soil. So you go back again, you can dump a bunch more water in it. And the easiest way to tell is just lift the pot and see how much weight there is there. When they're bone dry, they seem ridiculously light. This one is really heavy because, again, this root ball was damaged. It's a lot smaller, so it takes longer to suck up all that moisture. So this is the wettest one of all. But again, I watered these, 5 days ago, and they feel heavy. I could lift this with one hand pretty easily if this one was completely dried out. Overwatering is always more of a problem than underwatering. Those are still alive and they look god awful. If you're overwatering and your plant starts to look like it's dying, that's root rot, and the plant's probably shot. There's not a lot of coming back from that. And so here's your composted forest products. There's a lot of not small pieces of wood in here. That one's nice and rotten, nice and punky, but there were some bigger sticks in here that I was breaking up. But that's what you get for $5. I don't care to drive to Lima or Findlay just to get a bale of peat moss. I didn't think I had any perlite either. It turns out I do have like a 4 cubic foot bag of perlite in my gazebo. But rather than worrying about what place is going to actually have peat moss this time of year, I just figured I'd get a couple bags of potting soil and that would get me through. The only thing I'm starting right now is peppers and onions. Tomatoes grow so fast that I don't start those until mid to late March. The thing about onions, the reason you have to start them so early is you want to give them a good, like 3 months, 12 weeks before you plant them out. But you plant onions out, they're really cold tolerant. You plant those out a full month before your last frost date. So mid-April, I'm going to be planting these onions out. So I'm already behind for giving them 3 months of growth before then. When they're the size of a hair or a blade of grass, they're really susceptible to like wind and rain. I think they do take a hit if they're too small when you set them out. So I may actually push it back a little later if they don't get enough growth between now and then. I used to push it and put them out in like late March. Although an onion plant is very cold tolerant, very frost tolerant, seedlings are not the same. And I've had all my seedlings that I put out there green turn completely yellow. Part of that is the sun will do that. Down here under these shop lights, I got all these LED lights that's really bright when I have them all on, hovering, this far over my tray. But that infrared UV radiation, whatever it is, the sun is a hell of a lot more powerful than these lights, even from however far away. So anything you start in the grow room, you have to harden off outside. Like pick one day, 7 to 10 days to harden things off. The first day, put them out in like dappled sun for an hour. Next day, 2 hours. Next day, 4 hours. The next day, 8 hours. Depending on where you put it in the garden, you can probably leave it there as long as the nights aren't going to get too cold. You want to suscept them to a little bit of airflow. I have a fan back there. That fan's way too big for this purpose, but if you got like one of them little fans kind of on a chip clip looking thing where, a fan this big that you can have blowing on your seedlings, they'll be a lot stronger just from that movement. The stems stiffen up. They get a little bulkier. But you never want to put plants straight out from the grow room right out into the garden without hardening them off. The sun will kill them. They're just completely not acclimated to that. I've done in the past where I saw it's going to be like cloudy but mild temperatures for a week, so I just stick them in a shady spot and leave them out there. As long as they're getting some sun, they're starting to get acclimated, and then you can kind of move them around depending on where your shade's going to be. Are the trees leafed out yet? These peppers, when I go to bring these back out, I'll put in a place where in time of year where the maple trees are just starting to leaf out, and that's enough dappled sun that I'll put them where they're under the maple trees. They get that dappled shade in the morning, but they're close enough to my house that afternoon they're completely in full shade. And that because they're heavy, I don't want to be bringing them in and out. So you find that spot around your home to um, use what you can, use your space the most effectively. Um, but the general rule is half hour to an hour of sun exposure the first day, and then just like double it the next day and the next day and the next day. Um, and just keep an eye on your weather forecast. If it's something that's not frost tolerant and you've got freezing temperatures at night, you got to bring them back in. If you got like a warm spot for a few days, you can leave them out. It's way less work. That's pretty much my 2 cents on that. I have had okay success starting onions, and the best success I had, onion is a cool weather crop, but I always have better luck when I start my onions on a heat mat. I got 3 heat mats over here. The lights are on a timer. I think 14 hours is what I have the lights going, 6 a.m. to like 8 p.m. But the heat mats need to be on the entire time. So they're on a strip that's straight into an outlet. They're on until you don't need them anymore. You don't want to derail your germination process. So once you start your pepper seeds, onion seeds, get them on the heat mat, leave the heat mat on until you have good germination. You can leave it on even for a little bit after that. You don't have to. Pepper plants don't like cold basements. You can see like this, the leaves up here closest to the lights. It's obviously still alive. I've got 3 peppers that are ripening right now. And you can tell just on these plants, the farther you get away from the lights, the less the leaf works. So the plant just kind of sacrifices the leaves that aren't doing much of anything for it. Where was I going with this? But every year, even had I not forgot to water them, these leaves look kind of half wilted. I would say they look sad. Pepper plants do not like cool temperatures. Anything under 50 will kill them. But once it's been out, and these peppers were out all summer last year, so they were 80s, 90s all summer, and it's probably 60, maybe 62 down here. So they're not happy. They'll suffer through. Again, plants are expendable, and I don't care about their feelings. So anyway, I'm going to get some of the soil put in these trays. I have 2 different colors because I'm doing mostly yellow onions. I'm also going to plant some red onions. Let me turn you around here for a second. There's my braids from last year's onions, along with all our Christmas storage. But like to have a little bit of red onion just for some variety, maybe a little difference in flavor. Let's see what we got. Yeah, I'm noticing lots of wood chunks. Here's another piece of avocado. The husk of avocados takes a long time to break down. Pit even longer. I have to pick pits out of here because they end up going through with everything. If I really wanted to have the avocado pits be completely broken down, it would be a couple-year process, I think. So I end up, when I'm harvesting my worm castings and I see avocado pits, I just pick them out, put them in a can or something to toss out by the river. want some wood. Funky wood is fine. Holds moisture well. It doesn't take too terribly long to break down once it's in the system. Once it's in your garden bed. But wood that's still like really hard and you can hear it snap, that's just going to tie up nitrogen as it tries to break down. There's a stone. Get what you pay for. I won't be buying that stuff again. I was looking at black gold today. The black gold, I think that's the brand name. They have like a organic soil mix. It's got a little, and they actually say their nutrients come from worm casting. So theirs does have some nutrients mixed in there where you don't have to go back with fertilizer. If you're using just straight seed starting mix or sterile potting mix, you know, the seed contains enough energy to get that seedling out and growing. But you know, once you start seeing true leaves, they all have that first set of leaves. It's just a generic teardrop round shape. Those first two leaves, and then they get their true leaves that look more like whatever plant you're actually growing. Once you see those, if you're using a sterile mix, you got to start feeding with some sort of fertilizer. So that's something to think about. The other thing you just saw me do is I went and compressed all of this. Push your fingers down, give it a good push. You got to fill in all those gaps and stuff in there, and then what you'll find out is you'll end up needing more. Try to pick all these chunks out. I don't even know if I have enough onion seeds to fill all these, especially if I'm doing like 3 or 4 seeds in each cell. I might not have enough, but whatever it is, it is. I don't really have time to order more. And if I'm really short, I'll go buy some starts at the hardware store whenever, you know, when the potatoes are out, I'll go buy some onion starts there. There's nothing wrong with, you know, go to Meijer or wherever you get your grocery store. Basically, we probably have onion starts. I don't like sets because those are a full year old already. And what happens is, instead of getting like a really big onion, you might get a medium-sized onion that then goes to seed and tries to flower. Those aren't good for storing, and they won't get very big. Once it tries to send that shoot out to flower, your bulb's not getting any bigger. So that's why you start from seed or starts rather than sets. Okay. Good enough. My onions. This is something you won't see. You'll never see professional growers start seeds in something this big. Because you can have any number of problems that happen with an individual cell or an individual seed. So they start in flats like this, you know, 1 or 2 seeds in each one. And if you get really 50% germination, that's fine if you're going to transfer them to this. I'm lazy, and I'll use 3 or 4 seeds in each one, especially if they're old, because taking them from this to this is just extra work that I don't feel the need to do. So I'm just going to fill these up now. Actually, I'm not 100% sure I even have enough soil to do that, so we'll find out here in a minute. But I'm all for saving yourself extra work whenever you can. Gardening doesn't have to be hard, it doesn't have to take up a lot of your time, and it definitely doesn't have to be expensive. My by far favorite YouTube channel is an old one. He doesn't upload videos anymore. So the most recent one's probably 5 years old. But there's a channel called 1 Yard Revolution, and a guy named Patrick, and his whole thing is how to grow a lot of food on a little land without spending much or working harder than you have to. And I love that. I've probably seen every one of his videos at least once, some of them 4 or 5 or 6 times. But yeah, I mean, you really don't have to spend much money at all if you're willing to do a little bit of legwork, like the compost bins or the worm bins, for example. I built these, then I don't buy fertilizer anymore, and I don't have to walk my kitchen scraps out to the back corner of the yard to my compost pile anymore, because the kitchen scraps all go in here, except for you don't want to put proteins in there, so no meat, cheese, no eggs, but pretty much everything else that you can think of that, when you're peeling any vegetable, whatever parts you don't use goes right in here. I just have a bin. It's like a little trash can hanging on the inside of my cabinet under the sink. So I'm making eggs in the morning. I open that sink door, put the lid down. When I'm cracking eggs, they go right in there. Same thing if I'm peeling potatoes. I just peel right over that thing. And then at least once or twice a week, I keep like a grocery bag in there. I just take that bag down here, along with all the shredded paper I have at the time, all the junk mail, pretty much. And that affords me, I don't have to buy fertilizer. And as far as organic material, bulk organic material for my gardens, I just use leaves. That's it. I get, my town does, there's charcoal. My town does leaf pickup in the fall, and my yard is easier for them to access than where they have to go to dump that stuff. So I just asked the city guys, hey, can you drop me 2 loads of leaves? Sure, no problem. We back the truck back there. Now I have a space that's probably 5 yards wide, 20 yards long. That's just perpetually a leaf pile. At the end of the summer, I will take that pile and I use a front skid loader, and I just push that whole 20 yards of pile up into one mountain, one tall at the time pile that's, I don't know, 10, 15 feet in diameter. And then right after that, I'll get another 2 loads of leaves right where that just was. And so that process, when I'm using it in the garden, it's a full, like, year and a half after the start of the process. So what was once leaves, a year and a half later, is pretty much what you call leaf mold. It's the organic equivalent to, like, peat moss. It's not acidic like peat moss is. Compost. It's basically compost. Leaf mold is compost derived from one ingredient, which is fall leaves. It's really, really good organic material for your garden, and you'll find out if you garden for a long time that every year the soil in your garden bed shrinks a little bit. It's really evident in raised beds, not so much if you're just growing right in the ground, but a raised bed that you top off so the soil's level with the top of your beds. One year, that after that winter, you'll come back out there and you got, it's down here, like you've lost 3-4 inches of soil over the winter, and people might think that that's compaction, but really it's organic breakdown. Your plants, think of how much material, how much volume, how mass that you harvested out of there that grew from that soil. Those cells came from somewhere. All that energy and all that biomass came from your soil. So you have to replenish that. And nutrient-wise, I keep talking about I have worm bins, so I don't have to buy fertilizer. But if you've got a source of good organic compost where you can put 2 inches of compost on your garden every year, there's been multiple studies by universities that show 2 inches of compost is adequate for soil nutrients for a year, for a growing season. So that's something to think about too. Okay, I did have plenty of soil. Let's see if I can shake off some of the excess that kind of fell down in between there. Well, I have plenty until I do this. That part's important. If I would just leave that in there loose like that, it will compact down quite a bit after I water. So, and this is moist, by the way. Don't ever do this with a completely dry material, because when you try and water that, again, it'll take forever before it will actually accept that moisture. And it's like you'll have a layered effect, where the stuff on top clumps and sticks to your fingers and everything, and the stuff on the bottom still going dry. So make sure that when you're mixing your material before you fill these, that this has a good moisture content, and you want it to feel damp, like a wrung out sponge. Like if I squeeze, it clumps a little bit, but you can do that. You can like just make it right back into powder. But if you squeeze it really hard and you have water run out, that's a little too damp. So that's kind of what you're looking for. You're looking for you can like feel that it's moist. You can squeeze it into a clump, sort of, and then but you can't wring any water out. Lots of wood. Wood is how everybody does, shouldn't say everybody. Most companies get their organic content. They just use wood chips, which is fine if they're aged long enough. Like if they're spongy and I can twist it and it breaks apart, that punky wood that's already pretty well broke down like that right there, I just squeeze it and it basically mushed apart. That's fine, but the like still hard, dry, like younger wood chips, if you have a lot of that in your soil, it ties up nitrogen. So that's one of the harder things too. If you're starting your garden and you got a bunch of raised beds to fill, what's the best material? Well, you want to get something with higher organic content. Do not just get topsoil. That will compress. The topsoil is mostly clay, in my opinion. It's not good for starting a garden. I got a load of topsoil when I started, and I had like a homemade compost pile that I could fill one of my smaller beds with. And then the other beds, I got topsoil. And when you're digging in your yard in July and it's like hard as a rock, your garden bed will be like that soon enough if you just buy topsoil. Even the stuff that they call garden mix, in my opinion, is woefully short of what you would prefer to have. Yeah, I don't see any way around this. So, just be careful when you're buying bulk garden soil from any retailer, landscape company, big box store, things like that. You can get like a bulk pro mix, which if you can afford that would be great. Um, you, again, there's not a lot of nutrient content in that, but it's enough to get you started. The other things you want to think about if you're getting bulk soil to start a garden is weeds and pesticides or herbicides. Um, if there's a place that takes everybody's lawn trimmings and um, old plant material, you never know what's going into that. So if there's any hint of Roundup or even the stuff that everybody puts on their lawn, like weed and feed or weed preventer, um, the Scots, whatever the stuff is that most people put on their lawn because they want no weeds, they want just grass because they think a monoculture looks nice. That stuff, when it breaks down into compost, those chemicals are still doing their job quite well. Um, I want to say Lehigh University, but I can't be sure. One of them did a study. They did like they had the college did its own garden, and they made their own compost for their garden, and then like nothing grew. And they had done a soil test, and it didn't come up with any pesticides or anything, but like it was junk soil, like nothing was growing in it. So they went back and they tested again, but instead of parts per million, they tested for herbicides at parts per billion, and that's when they found it. So the levels were very, very, very low, but those chemicals work so well against vegetables, which they're not noxious weeds. They have like no defense to herbicides at all. They're probably the most susceptible. Um, if you end up getting that stuff, you can't grow anything. So the test you want to do, if you're going to buy from a source you're not super familiar with, see if they'll give you a 5-gallon bucket or even just a pot full of their soil to take home. There's something you can do. You could just get a few of these and put that stuff in them. And what you do, say you get 2 or 4. These 2, don't plant anything in there. Just water them. These 2, plant a broadleaf like peas or beans or something that sprouts easy and you got viable seed for. Beans, those are pretty bulletproof. They always sprout. So put a bunch of seeds in these 2. Plant no seeds, nothing in these 2, and then water them just like you would anything else when you're trying to get something to grow. If you don't get any growth in the ones you planted in, it means there's probably pesticides or herbicides in that. If you get a bunch of growth where you didn't plant anything, it means it's full of weed seeds, which is it's not the end of the world, but it's not ideal either. If you want, what you could do, if you had one that was a decent source, but it was full of weeds, you could fill most of your bed with that. And then make yourself a hot compost pile where it hits 150 for 3 days straight or something like that. And if you don't have a compost thermometer, if you make a hot compost pile where you're doing lots of carbons, nitrogens, a little bit of water, carbons, nitrogens, a little bit of water, and you get a 4 foot by 4 foot pile going. 3 days later, you walk up to that and do one of these, steam will come out because it's 150 degrees in the middle. So a hot compost pile renders inert any weed seeds that are subjected to that much heat. And the best recommendation, like if you're selling organic compost, the pile has to be turned 5 times. And the biggest benefit to that, I think that's overkill for sure, but you want to turn it at least once or twice so you can get all that heat's on the inside, so all that stuff on the outside isn't breaking down, at least not as fast. It's an endothermic process, it's an exothermic process that produces heat, but all that heat's in the core. So, you know, if you make your hot compost pile, 3 days later you can see steam coming out the middle of it. Close it back up, give it a couple more days, and when it's not quite as warm as it was, as soon as you get to that point where you feel like the temperature's starting to drop off a little bit, take the pile apart and rebuild it. I have it's like a piece of, it's plastic chicken wire basically that I wrap it up in and fill up. So I have a compost thermometer too. But 5 days after you make the pile, 6, 7 days, when the heat's starting to fall off, take your chicken wire, move it right next to the pile, and then scoop it all back in there. Make sure you're mixing plenty of air in. If it seems a little dry, spray a little more water at it. But if you make hot compost and you do it really well, and it's, maybe at the end of the process, the outsides aren't completely broken down, but you're going to use whatever's in the middle. If that was hot enough, and you'll know, like, you could burn your hand if you put your hand in there and just held it there for a while. So you'll know if you have a hot pile. And if you do that, the seeds contained in there will be sterilized. They won't germinate. You cooked them. So if you could take a less than ideal soil mix, as long as there's no chemicals in it, fill your bed most of the way, and then just top off the last couple inches with that sterilized stuff. And weed seeds that are down 3 inches, seeds need warmth, they need sunlight in order to germinate, and they don't like pushing through a thick layer of dirt to get to the sun. That's why if you use a shredded leaf, if you use some kind of mulch, weeds are super easy to pull and you get a lot less of them, just because the soil's covered, so you have way less germination. But if you do get germination, they're pushing through so much material that they're really leggy. The roots are really stringy and easy. They're way easier to deal with than your average weed that's sitting at the top of bare dirt. So there's some tips for if you're starting a new garden. I need to go get my seeds, and then for my peppers, I've done peppers for years and years now, and I've pretty much decided bell peppers, I'm going to start with new seedlings every year, because bell pepper plants in the raised bed, they get huge, they're really vigorous, and they give me really big peppers. And any bell peppers that I drag in and out every year, the peppers are small. So if I'm growing smaller peppers or something that's like really nifty, like these are Italian frying peppers. So they're like they're jalapeno shaped. They've got that cone shape, but they're really big and they have no heat. Those start early, and they're nice to cook. Those are going to be ready long before my bell peppers are ready. So that's why I have 2 pots of those that I was going to keep. One red and one yellow, just because I'll get peppers earlier that way. Bell peppers seem to be the opposite. I get peppers earlier from the seedlings than I do from the couple-year-old plants that I drag out of this winter hell until them start growing again. And the bigger pots are a pain in the butt to water. You don't want to water them every day because it's too much. And then you're like, when is the right time? And I haven't figured that out yet. 3 days is kind of, they do okay. It's not great. And I don't know which way to adjust from there. So this is going to be mostly Sweet California Wonder. They do really well. They get really big. I get lots of peppers from them. Um, if you let them ripen, they're a red pepper. If you like green peppers, just cut them off when they're green. The only difference between a red pepper, a red bell pepper, and a green bell pepper is the green ones were cut off before they were ripe. That's the only difference. So I'm thinking most of this will be Sweet California Wonder, and then the rest will be jalapeno. My wife likes jalapeno poppers. Um, I do too, obviously. But my uncle will probably want a couple pepper plants for me as well. So yeah, I'm not getting all crazy and doing all kinds of different varieties this year. I've done it enough. Last year, I was like, well, I've heard that mini bells are really cool and they're a great snack. So I grew mini bells last year, and you get, mini bell peppers that are that big, but they're completely full of seeds. And they're almost impossible to eat without getting a mouthful of seeds. So that's why I have a lot less peppers down here this year than I have in all the past years, because I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. The banana pepper was meh, so I got rid of that. So I'm kind of narrowing my focus on what I really like to have, what matters to me. Um, and everybody, I think, changes what you grow from year to year just based on what works and what you've tried and what you like. So I'm gonna go get my seeds, um, and then we'll finish this project up. Okay, so I've got my color coded system here. I'm only growing two types of onions: uh, sweet Spanish yellow onions and Weathersfield red. I do believe those are both long day, um, because we're far enough north. We have a long day in the summer. We get like 16 hours of sun or something like that in the summer. So your onion variety will be based on how far north you are. If you're in Texas, you can't grow what I'm growing because you won't get big bulbs. You need a short day onion. And the same thing, if I'm trying to grow what they have a lot of success with in Texas, up here, that's not going to work very well because I need to grow a long day onion. So if you're starting from seed, that's something to think about. Listen for the name. So a sweet Spanish Utah, Utah's far enough north, that's a long day onion. If you get a Louisiana something, or a Georgia flame, or well, that's a pepper, but usually there's clues in the name. So if you got a Texas onion, you don't want to grow that in Ohio. But you can always look up the variety and see online if they're long day or short day. I said I lied to you guys already. I said I was going to do two kinds of peppers, but I bought cayenne pepper specifically, the long thin cayenne peppers, because I want to do my own chili powder. So that means I've got three. And I don't buy plant markers. My mother-in-law was at a garage sale and somebody had like an arts and crafts thing where they had a box of 500 popsicle sticks. So that's what I'm going to use. I'm using popsicle sticks. So you got your popsicle stick and your trusty Sharpie, which I don't appear to have, so we'll start with a pencil. But after so much water, you won't be able to read the pencil anymore. So do get that Sharpie at some point. For now, this will work. But yeah, like for sure, once you plant these outside, if you're using wood stakes, pencil's not going to show up for very long. Just do TJ for Tam Jalapeno. I wonder if it's supposed to be tame jalapeno because it's not supposed to be as hot. They're still plenty hot. One thing I have noticed about this variety is they don't get quite as long as I would like. But I want to get started. nowhere around here has seeds out yet because it's January, and I don't want to wait for a week if I order something online. So that's what I'm going with. And then I have cayenne. I might only do one row of cayenne, and then I'll do SCW, Sweet California Wonder, for the rest of these. I like to use the pencil eraser, this part, when I make my little seed holes, because you can kind of tell where a 1/4 inch is, where a 1/2 inch is, depending on what you're starting. So I'm going to go make my little holes here. I don't know if you can hear that. Morgan's got her 80s route going upstairs. When you're doing this, if you're starting in trays like this, you need to have the little plastic dome. Once you're starting your seeds, you want them to stay moist but not soggy. And the only way to get it right is you start with the right amount of moisture, and then you put a plastic dome over it, and just it kind of stays at that level until you see germination. As soon as you see seeds germinating, you got to get that off of there, because you don't want what they call dampening off. Well, at some point there, my battery died. So I was rambling about, I actually saved these seeds because I crossed off 21 and wrote 23 on the packet. So I know that these were fresh seeds as of like 1.5 years ago. So I'm still putting 3 seeds in each hole, because I want to make sure I get at least one plant. If you get 3, cool, you can cut 2 of them off. But it's no fun when you put some seeds in and then you don't get anything. So I'm still hedging my bets. And again, I didn't pay anything for those. I just, when I was cutting up a pepper, or probably when I was making poppers, you scooping those seeds out with a spoon, it's really easy. Just put them in a pile, get the little plant bits off of there, let them dry for a day or 2, pop them in the envelope, and you have your own seeds. And also, it's good to make sure that you get seeds from a couple different peppers, so you have a little bit different genetics. You're not just using one where there could have been a problem with that particular fruit. Even better is if you can get seeds from peppers that came off of 2 different plants. That would be for the genetics issue I just raised. Anyway, so there's the jalapenos planted. We got these cayennes. Also, this says days to germination, 10 to 12. 7 to 10. And the bell peppers, 10 to 14. So I could potentially have jalapenos a full 7 days before the bell peppers sprout. It is what it is. I'm leaving the seed mat on until they're all germinated. You could, well, I wouldn't leave it on the whole, 3 months they're going to be down here, because for one, you want to minimize your fire risk as much as possible, but also your electric bill. And once everything's germinated, there's no reason to keep it on, because that's just going to help your soil dry out faster, which you don't really want. You don't want to have to come down here and water every day, every other day. Every other day you should be checking. Like if everything's sprouted, everything's going good, you should at least check every other day to make sure nothing's like super dried out and needs water. It's going to be for these, I will water way less than these. Um, Hopefully it's obvious, but I mean, there's just a lot more bulk, more volume there to deal with. Then we get closer to summer, if these peppers get, they're nice and healthy and this tall, um, then it might even out a little. But for now, the onions will get a lot more water. Will need watered more often than the peppers, just from lack of soil volume. They can't hold that much. Here's my cayennes. So I'm planting these like a 1/4 inch deep. My pencil has no eraser. If it had a full eraser, that would be about how far you go, is that pencil eraser. Then you just kind of close it up, give it a little pat. Good soil contact also helps those seeds germinate. Oh, hello. We haven't done this one yet. That's a little too deep. Okay. Now, I don't have much left in the way of the bell pepper seed. Turns out I do. These are getting old. I haven't saved any off of these. So this is from several Christmases ago. So I'm going to do a healthy pinch, 4 or 5 seeds in each one of these. The older your seeds get, the worse your germination rate will be. Carrots, I would say it's more important than peppers. The worst plant for that is parsnips. If your parsnip seeds aren't new for this year, you might as well pitch them. They're the most notorious for old seed not working out for you. So I've got 4 or 5 seeds in most of these. I have a little bit left, but hopefully this year I'll remember to save my bell pepper seeds. Now, one thing I will tell you, I was rambling on earlier about my worm bins and how all the scraps go in there. That includes cores of peppers. So, these worm bins, meaning this soil, is full of pepper seeds already. And I will get peppers anywhere and everywhere eventually. Notice it more with my tomatoes. You don't notice it with your brassicas, your cold crops, because you don't have them on heat. Once you transport them out in the garden, transplant them, you might notice little pepper seedlings, close to your plant, right up against there. That's from the worm castings. When I do melons, all the seeds go in there. When I do peppers, that whole core just goes right in the compost bin in the kitchen, which then comes down here. It's just something that I am aware of. I know about it. That got me one year, this last year, on when I was starting my watermelon in the garden. I had, those first set of leaves on most plants look the same. It's a generic round leaf. So I had a melon plant where I thought was the watermelon that I had intentionally planted. And it turned out, once it got true leaves and the true leaves got a decent size, like that is not a watermelon plant. It was either a squash or probably a melon. I'm sure from my worm castings. But overall, I'm not too worried about it. I'm not going to stop putting all that, material in there because everything goes in there. It's really easy, and I know about it. So when these are growing, I guarantee you I'm going to get all these seeds I planted in the middle. So if I get something that seems like it's way off to one side, that's not what I planted. Although odds are it's a sweet California wonder because that's what we use most of in the kitchen. Um, when I'm doing jalapenos and stuff like that, I'm usually doing that out on the patio in the middle of summer. Um, but it's just something that I'm aware of and I can easily watch for. I notice it a lot when I'm starting my tomatoes. In a couple months, I'll show you that video. And there's something a little different you do with tomatoes, but again, they're on the heat mat, so I'll get little pepper seedlings coming up in with my tomatoes. It's cool. You just, I have, what's that? I keep a little scissors down here. So as soon as these start coming up, if I've got 3 pepper plants there, 2 of them get the snip. I might let them get a little big just to make sure I'm leaving the healthiest one. And it's not necessarily the tallest one. My domes, I bought some kind of heavy dutier stuff from Bootstrap Farmer. These domes are taller than the ones you're going to get with the cheap plastic trays. So that means when I'm first starting, my lights can't be very close. You want your light to be within 2 inches of the soil surface, just because man-made light really loses its potency with distance when you're talking about energy for your plants. So this is rather far away. Once I can get that off, I can get my lights down a little closer. Forget where I was going with that. Lost my train of thought. Never happened to you? Happened to me all the time. So anyway, got the peppers started. You know what? Let's just do this right now. You do not need one of these. I have this because I'm watering the worm bins all the time, and that little spray mister bottle takes forever. I go through 2 bottles when I water this thing, so that's not my favorite. For a long time, I had this guy. Put a bunch of holes in the lid, and I would just do this. But again, that would be like 3 or 4 of these to water this. So, well, the Android ran out of storage space, so welcome to the iPhone. Onions, I'm going to do a little bit different. I'm not going to make the divots like I did for the peppers. I've got a little bit of space left at the very top of this, which I think will be just enough for what I want to do. I also don't think I have enough onion seeds. That's what I got. So I'm going to really sparsely flick them on the floor. It's not going to help. But I would like to have 3, 4, 5 each one of these. I'm not going to make it. Start with 2s and 3s and come back around. But I've always had not the best luck starting onions, which I've kind of overcome by just using lots and lots of seeds. And I have always seen videos like Luke on MI Gardener and Gardener Scott. They have videos. They do onions. My favorite YouTube channel is 1 Yard Revolution, but he has like a partial sun garden. He doesn't have a lot of full sun except in his front yard where he does potted plants, so not a lot of onions. So he didn't really have an onion guide. But Luke at MI Gardener, he grows big onions, so you should watch his stuff. And one of the things he does is he sows like this, or now, he just does a bulk tray where you have the whole tray and you just spread your seeds, broadcast them throughout the whole tray. But what he's done in the past is he would take, a container, like this, let's say. He will sow all these seeds broadly in there, and him and Gardner Scott both will top them off with vermiculite, which is something that I haven't seen in stores a lot. And I went there to get that cheapo potting mix today, and they had a bag of vermiculite. So I told you earlier, perlite is that expanded volcanic rock. That white stuff looks like styrofoam. It does not absorb any water. Water kind of sticks to all its crevices, but vermiculite is a little different because it actually stores water. So the reason they do this is because there's a certain type of fly that will love to lay its eggs right at the top of this soil medium, and it really ruins your onions, your onion starts. So what you do is you just take some vermiculite and cover the top of your onion seeds, rather than, you know, when I was talking about small seeds, using that fine seed starting mix. You have very small particles, much like this, so that most seeds want some soil adherence to the seed in order for them to germinate. This kind of does the same thing. You saw I sprinkled them in. I didn't cover them up with dirt at all. I'm covering them up with this vermiculite. But vermiculite is an inert substance. There's nothing for these, I think it's a white fly, to lay their eggs in. It's not an organic material. So this is kind of like a barrier to prevent that pest issue, but you're still getting a substance up against the walls of your seed. It's a whole moisture there, basically. Onion seeds are planted very shallow, or you wouldn't be able to do this. But vermiculite will actually expand and hold water. I tried to do this with perlite, and people have done this with perlite. The heavier waterers will do this with perlite, but with the vermiculite, you'll have a little bit more moisture right at the surface there, and I can still cover it with the dome. Now, earlier I said that you could take, you know, if I get 4 onions growing here, like 4 little blades of grass, I could take the whole plug and just put that plug in the ground in the garden. You can do that, and you'll have success, and you'll get 4 onions that are like this big. I want big onions, so I will, once I'm out in the garden, make sure I have enough. I mean, I assume I'm going to have some completely empty spaces here, so I will be pulling apart and planting one little onion at a time when I'm putting these out in the garden. The other way you get big onions is you don't let the leaves get real long and flop over. As soon as the neck of the onion bends over, it's done. It's not going to grow anymore. So one of the things you want to do if you want large onions is during the summer, your onions are going to, like, you know, if your onion bulbs are sitting here, you're going to have greens, you know, 3 feet tall. And you want to cut those off before they kink and bend over, or before they get so long that the whole neck just flops over. Now, when you prune those, it seems really drastic because you have all these open straws basically on your onion greens, but those will shrivel up and close within a couple of days, especially, you know, in July when you're going to be doing this, when they're starting to get pretty big. I mean, you'll start it in June, but in July the size of the want to say leaves, but tubes or spikes might be a better term. You'll know what I mean once you start growing onions. They start getting really big, but they get top heavy, they kink and bend over, they kind of domino each other over. And again, once the neck right at the top of the bulb, once that bends, you're not going to get any more growth. So anything you can do, anytime you see one of them straws kink like this, you pick that off, or cut it off right below where it bent, or even a little lower if you still got plenty of leaf there. Every layer in your onion is one of those leaves or spikes or straws. And if you're cutting them off when they get too big, too top heavy, you'll get more. The plant will keep producing more, and that's what puts more layers on your onion. The biggest thing is when you got that, like there's going to be a bad storm coming in July. There's always those, high winds, thunderstorms that we get in the middle of summer. If you got onions sitting out there that are looking kind of top heavy and have those really long, I've had in the past year one storm, half my onions were, they fell over in the storm and they were done. My onion harvest was pretty much set in stone a month before I wanted it to be. So I didn't get great onions. And plus, if you keep them from bending over prematurely, you can let your onions stand in the garden for a while, even when you okay, these are ready. If you can let them stand there through all that hot weather and start letting it get cool again, when you're talking about like storage for longevity, nowhere will they keep better than still sitting in the garden until you literally start to get root rot. Once it starts getting soggy again in October when you get a lot of rain. So anything you can do to kind of prolong their stay in the garden will help you if you're planning on trying to store your onions. Once your crop is done, again, you've always got some onions that fall over long before others, but once you've hit a point where you're like, okay, we're going to harvest the onions soon. One of the old farmers' tricks I've heard was you take your garden rake, and I've done this. Take your garden rake, the one that's got the heavy metal tines that are like that long. Use the flat end of that and just knock all the onions over, because you want to give them a week or two for that neck to really like shrivel up and kind of kink itself off, because the ones that were still more or less erect, where that neck still had some good girth to it, when you pull them out of the ground, they won't dry and keep as well. I can't explain it any better than that, really. I don't know exactly why. I think it just has to do with like the wicking of moisture, and if you can kind of get that neck more closed off where it's more papery, less moisture gets in and out of that bulb, so they will keep better. And then whenever you harvest onions, once you pull them, you let them sit somewhere dry. Oh, well, it's gonna be that time, I guess. You let them sit somewhere dry with good airflow. I don't think sun, yes or no sun, is a big issue, but you want to let them completely dry out so that all that green turns to paper. It takes a week or two. So good airflow, keep them not piled on top of each other. I lay mine out, I kind of spread them out so none are laying on top of each other on a table in my gazebo. I just let them sit there for 2 weeks. At which point I braid all mine onto a string. There's all kinds of videos on that. I can show you this year when I do it. But you just cut all the dried leaves off with a scissors, and you're left with just enough of a neck to work with to tie it onto your string. And it's not really tying, it's more weaving. It's really easy to do. But anyway, I'm done with the onions. I'm gonna water this, and I did want to show you guys if I can figure out where I put it. I don't think you need a sprayer like this to do this. I bought that sprayer mostly because this is what I always was using. I have to refill it 3 or 4 times to water that when I water it. So I just used like a pin, a corkboard pin, and I put, I don't know, 10, 12 holes in the cap of this 20 ounce, and then just squeeze. That works well enough. This is pretty gentle on seedlings and stuff like that. I can get a finer spray out of that thing, but you know, if you're going for, you're not trying to spend all kinds of money on your gardening, and you're not doing as much as I do. I use this for years, and this works fine. So I started with a damp mix, which is super important, and you want to give these a good soak until a little bit of water runs through. Now, if I do this too much and a lot of water runs through, I might switch trays. I have a bunch of these trays, so I'll just take an empty tray, and I'll put them all over into that one, leave the excess water behind before I put the dome on. So I'll give this and this is also why I really like that I have a tiny bit of space in here. And if I just did this right in the tray, hard to tell if you overwater it. This feels pretty heavy to me, but if I just take one of these out of here, everything down there is still dry. All that, you know, overflow peat soil stuff in there, it's all still dry. I don't know, see if you can't see that, but I assure you it is. But that's pretty much it. Here's the peppers. And you can do this with leftover flats from a greenhouse. You don't have to go out and buy this stuff. I did because after so many years of dealing with like flimsy stuff that always cracked, I wanted something a little beefier. So bootstrap farmer, if you're into that kind of thing, or if you just got FU money you want to spend on your garden, then more power to you. That's where I got mine, and it's heavy duty. It's like lifetime. I don't know if they say lifetime warranty, but like you're not going to break it very easily. So I've got my heat mats on. I'm going to put the domes on these, and there is no reason you have to have light on these until you have germination. But I feel like that even I don't want to come down here every single day. I know I'm not going to check on these. So if I miss the day that like everything started to pop up, my peppers won't get super leggy because they were like 24, 36 hours without any light. So I'm still putting the lights over them. But as soon as I do see some of those starting to pop up, I'll get that dome off and get the lights down a lot closer. And let me show you what I'm talking about with lights here. I'll show you off way. So here's what I got going on. I got 3 shop lights. Ignore all the cords. 3 shop lights on a timer, and I've got that heat mat is not on. So these 2 heat mats are going 24 hours a day now until I unplug them. So this is it. They're gonna sit here for the next several days and do absolutely nothing. After about a week, I should start to see some signs of life, and I can take these domes off. And as soon as I do that, I will lower these. They're all on chains. I will lower these lights even more. So yeah, that's it. You don't have to have the lights on. That's not a necessity if you're going to check them every day and not Me, I can't guarantee I'm going to check them every day. If I'm working 3 days in a row, that's 3 days I probably don't come down here. But I have some lights, uh, and ideally they would be much closer, but those domes don't allow that. If you don't get the lights on them right away, once they emerge, they'll get super leggy, and transplanting them will be a problem because they'll just want to fall over. It'll end up falling over, and you'll have stem laying on the ground, which just invites all kinds of problems, pest problems and disease and decay problems. So that's why I always leave the lights on when I do my starts, because I have missed them, and you pretty much start over. So anyway, I hope these videos help. Yeah, today's what, July 20, or July, holy cow. January 24th or 5th, 24th today. And that puts me a week behind for starting the onions. And some people may think that's pretty early for starting peppers, but I got room. I can raise these lights up another several feet. So peppers don't go out until nights are 50. I should say they don't stay out until nights are consistently in the 50. When you're watching the low temperatures in May, if you got a bunch of runs of 40s in there overnight, you're not putting your peppers and tomatoes out yet if you're smart, because you'll stunt the plants and put yourself further behind than if you would just leave them down here another week or two. During those days, you can start hardening off when it's warm, but if the nights are still cold, you got to bring it back in. Or get one of those, little greenhouse with the shelves and the zip closed plastic shell. Those can help you get out a couple weeks earlier if that's what you're waiting on, is the nights are getting too cold. One of those may be all you need. So I did buy one of those 2 years ago. And that's my plan for getting my onions. And after onions, it'll be, I pre-sprout my peas, so my peas go right in the dirt. But after onions and carrots and peas, then you're looking at all the greens. So lettuce, spinach, broccoli, kale, all that kind of stuff. Those are all cool weather crops. So you can kind of get a jump start on those. So right about the time you're planting those in the garden, maybe you can be moving these peppers and onions out to that little greenhouse if you have one. Just again, keep an eye on those lows, because they really don't like cold temps. So if your lows are low 40s or even high 30s, I wouldn't even use that. I'd probably bring them in. But if you got temps, let's say mid 40s, I wouldn't plant them yet. I'm talking overnight lows, mid 40s. You could keep them out in one of those greenhouses where you don't have to keep bringing them back in, to help your hardening off process. But yeah, tomatoes, peppers, don't put those plants in the ground until your lows are reliably in the 50s. All right, happy gardening.